Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Amid a grinding stalemate in eastern Ukraine and growing division among Western allies, President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have launched a revived ceasefire initiative aimed at halting hostilities between Kyiv and Moscow. The plan, which mirrors past proposals for a temporary freeze along current front lines, has stirred both cautious optimism and sharp concerns among NATO leaders. Joining us today on TVP World to dissect the strategy is Małgorzata Bonikowska, president of the Center for International Relations. With a deep background in European security and transatlantic policy, she brings critical perspective to this rapidly developing story. Hello, ma'am, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, good evening.
So when we take a look at this newly proposed revived ceasefire negotiation, what distinguished this proposal from the past failed efforts?
Well, first of all, I think American team understands that the complexity of the situation is really deep. It will not be a very easy process. I think Donald Trump himself understood that it's not possible really to push Russians or Ukrainians fast. I think Americans are now in a difficult position because the president wants results. The president wants as quick as possible to announce something to the American public, while the difficulty of the negotiations does not really seem like very likely that the war will finish this year. So I think Americans in this phase will try to use all the possibilities to really make one more step further.
Do you think this push to make a quick deal will put Americans' negotiating power on the back burner, seeing that, well, now Russia holds the card to kind of slow play this?
Well, I think the truth is that the Russians are very, very well prepared for these negotiations. They have a very stable team, not only Putin, but his men responsible for foreign affairs, especially Minister Lavrov, have been in power for 2 decades, while the team on the American side is comparatively unexperienced. So I think the Russians want to use the momentum and use this opportunity to push as hard as they can, but in the same time to continue talking, just to presume that they want to conclude something while they really don't want. That's the problem. And on the other side, Americans, maybe especially Trump himself, more and more nervous that there was no result. Look at what happened in Gaza, in the Middle East. The deal was done, and then again the situation worsened. So I think the Americans now try to find the ways, the leverage over Russians, which is not really an easy thing. I think the strategy at the beginning was to present to Russia a very beautiful picture of Russia back to the international community, Russia back to G7, namely to recreate G8, Russia without sanctions, Russia to be a part of international community that everybody discusses again with Putin. And the only idea of Americans was to show Russians that this will not happen if Russia does not really agree. But despite that, Russia doesn't agree, and Putin made Trump wait for his call for 2 hours. So it doesn't seem like Russians really approve American tactics, and I think it's very clear to everyone, to the Americans first, that Russians are not really willing to agree on the American idea how to make this deal. They want their own way, which may be extremely difficult to find the common ground with the Ukrainians.
Right. With Russia refusing to play ball, attention is also put on Europeans. Now, Europe is still in sort of a crisis mode, as it seems, during the EU summit on Thursday, that once again blocked the decision to help aid Ukraine, mostly by Hungary. How is that going to affect Ukraine's chances going forward?
Well, Of course, it's a very difficult situation for Ukrainians. They are very aware of being still quite dependent on American and, of course, European help. However, Ukraine feels existential threat from Russia, so they are not willing to stop fighting just because Americans decide that the war should stop. The Ukrainians feel that if they don't if they stop fighting, it's just a tactical break from Russia, that Russia wants to control whole of Ukraine, that the real reason of this war is not to let Ukraine go anywhere. Russia wants Ukraine, and that's it. And we are not talking about physical, occupation of territories. We are also talking about controlling the state, controlling the government, most likely expelling Zelensky and having somebody else on the top of the government, somebody who will be much more following Russian order, like it used to be during Yanukovych times. So Ukraine knows it very well. It's not only about what's happening in the battlefield, it's about control of the country. So in this case, Europe is a very important ally right now, where Americans play the game with Russians. So the determination of European Union to continue helping, and also other European allies such as UK, it's very important. It's crucial for Ukrainians. Ukrainians are able to fight basing on what they already have, the weapons accumulated for maybe 4 or 5 months. But at the end of the day, they need external allies. So Europe in this moment of the war is absolutely crucial. And it seems like working in the sense that Ukrainians discuss with the Europeans reorganize themselves. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, announced a rearm plan for the European Union. So many things are actually happening, not only in Brussels, but also in the European capitals. However, we are not one state. We are 27 members of the EU, and even more as far as the whole coalition helping Ukraine. So it is not very, very easy. And in the same time, you are absolutely right. We also have some differences of opinions, and especially countries like Hungary or Slovakia could be a permanent obstacle to the way how the EU institutions want to handle this situation.
Right, and speaking of the European Union, the EU reorganizing its defense structure, Ursula von der Leyen's rearm plan, Germany has recently also even changed their constitution to allow for more spending. Can you help us understand just how significant that is, and what kind of numbers are we looking at? Do you think that it would allow Germany to take a more leadership role in European defense?
Well, Germany is a very sensitive country as far as military and army and the war subject, of course, because of the 2 world wars, which started with Germany. So the society is not really willing to push the country back on the military path. So I don't think Germany can really lead. It's more likely that France, as far as the EU countries, can lead, and also the UK. UK is not in the EU, but it's one of the most important NATO allies in Europe. However, German economy is absolutely necessary in this effort, and also German willpower and German leadership in a sense of industry and restructuring the way how the EU is organized. There's no secret that for years, European Union was not really dealing with defense. We have in the Lisbon Treaty Article 42, which says or mentions common security and defense policy, but we also note that the European Union was not really a project for defense. We had and we still have NATO. But in the same time, because of American behavior and administration of Donald Trump, who definitely shows that it's not interested anymore in supporting Ukraine. He wants this war to finish, but the conditions may be difficult for Ukraine. Europe understands that we have to do this effort. And I think the political will is there. I think the understanding of this momentum is there in Europe. Both France and Germany, traditional engines for the European Union to grow, to continue to develop. They work, especially after the elections in Germany, and now most likely the government with CDU. So I think this is done. However, it is not only depending on Germany and France.
You just mentioned, of course, the European Union also taking up more responsibility when it comes to defense, as opposed to relying on the United States and NATO. Do you foresee a future where we see like a two-track system with NATO and the EU both trying to arm up with some sort of overlapping responsibility? How does that work?
Well, we still have a situation where NATO is the key pillar of European security. The US is in NATO. The US may act differently. Definitely, it's a completely new situation in the pact where the key ally and the leader actually of this pact is passive or declares désintéressement. So it's a big challenge for this organization. And of course, we need some time to reorganize NATO in order to recreate within NATO a very strong European group able to operate in the battlefield. The whole concept of NATO was based on collective defense and cooperation, but collective meant leadership of the US. So at the moment, right now, without US, we are not able to operate, but NATO is able to reorganize the structures of command and also the way how it operates, but we need time for that. In the same time, the EU, as a mostly economic organization, has a capacity to reorganize industries, because weapons, it's also, like good to sell, to buy. So in this regard, the EU will definitely do a lot, everything possible to reorganize the way how the European countries, industries produce. And instead of competing among each other, we will need more cooperation, common maybe purchases of weapons from elsewhere, much more money invested in the European production, not only in purchases elsewhere, especially in the United States or countries like South Korea. So a huge effort will be done within the EU defense industries to change it, to change the way how the Europeans think about this sector.
Brilliant. It's like leveraging the nature of the trade union to advance defensive goals. Thank you so much for helping us understand all of that. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on TVP World. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.